Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wildcast. My name is Calvin Coyles. I am welcomed today all the way from Canada with the incredible Robert Riopel. Robert and I have shared so many similarities in our experiences. He's almost like a little older brother to me in many ways. We've followed the same pathway, but with slightly different mentors. But to say that Robert's an international speaker and a success coach and a mentor would be understating it. He's also an author as well by background and has had probably the opportunity to speak on some of the biggest stages in the world alongside some of the biggest names in personal growth, business strategy, life success that you could name. If you were to put together a who's who's list of people in the industry that you and I would all know, Robert's worked with them, trained them, or spoke alongside of them. And when I saw some of the people that he's connected with, I thought this is going to be a fantastic conversation. So welcome, Robert. It's a pleasure to have you. I know it's only 2 a.m. for you over in Canada, so I appreciate your commitment. And I'm not in any way surprised that you're still showing up at this early hour of the morning. So thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure, Calvin. And look, when I see similarities, especially, I get excited because it's one thing to understand or want to be a trainer or a speaker, but to actually have the deep understanding of what it takes and to be able to have a conversation about that any hour of the day, because that's part of what it is to get success, is you're a whatever it takes person.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Well, look, I'm so excited to jump into this. I mean, I'd love to start. We had a little bit of conversation before we started this call, but I'd love to start with your backstory here in terms of how you and your partner and your wife came to get into personal development. What inspired you in that space? Was this something that you always wanted to do, or is it something that you sort of fell into? And then you've obviously then grown from being a student of this work to becoming a trainer and a trainer of trainers in this world as well. So I'm just really fascinated to see how you went in that journey if you start from the beginning, because I'd love to get that backstory.
Well, growing up here in Canada, in Alberta, where I live right now, we have a lot of oil. And so when oil prices are doing well, we do well. But when oil prices are low, there's no work. Yeah. And one thing that I was taught when I was younger is if I work hard and I stay loyal to a company, that company's going to take care of me. So I started working hard. By the time I was 21, I'd worked for 3 different companies. And I'm like, well, I'm working hard. I'm staying loyal. What's going on? Yeah. And it was downsized or let go. And at the time in 1989, I'm newly married. My wife and I actually in, 3 days from now, we celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary.
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible.
So, and I'm newly married in 89. I want to take care of my bride and there's no work. So I started delivering pizzas for Domino's Pizza because I needed to do something. Another thing I was taught, Calvin, is you do whatever it takes to take care of your family. So I start delivering pizzas and all of a sudden I'm doing that for a few months when my franchisee sells a store, but buys 2 in a city an hour and a half away. And I'm like, he's gone from 1 store to 2. I bet he needs a manager. So I said to him, look, I need something more permanent. Do you need a manager? A couple hours later, after talking, he said, yep, you start in 2 weeks. And I said to him, great, I've been driving. Can I have some experience in store? He goes, nah, you'll have lots of experience when you get there. And so I jump in with both feet. My wife becomes my assistant manager and we go back to our conditioning, working hard. And we start working open and close 7 days a week. And all of a sudden, now we're in a year and a half. And also my franchisee goes, I'm done with Domino's Pizza. I want franchisee now. And I'm like, we want to buy this store we're working in. But there's 2 problems. 1, he wanted to sell both stores. And 2, we had no money. One thing I do have though, Calvin, I have passion. And if there's something I want to do or something I want to accomplish, I'm going to find a way to do it. And it took us about 3 to 4 months of making mistake after mistake, or you could say learning curve after learning curve. We actually ended up buying both the stores he had for sale. And we did it with 100% financing. No money of our own needed to do it. And we became franchisees. And now we're franchisees and it's like, we've got it made, right? And we ended up being franchisees for 9 years. Now, during this time, my brother-in-law, who partnered with us in one of the stores, he's like, Robert, you got to listen to this Tony Robbins guy. And Calvin, to give you an idea of how old I am, he was on cassette tape.
Oh, my sauce.
And I'm like, I'm not listening to this stuff. I don't need that stuff. I'm too busy running my business. Well, by the time we were franchisees for 8 years, we were making what we thought was good money, but our mindset, we were spending more money than we were earning. Something you've probably heard all over the world in your trainings. And all of a sudden, by the time we were franchisees for 8 years, we're over $150,000 in debt. and going down quickly. And I'm stressed out. And you know, there's probably no worse stress for a lot of people than financial stress.
No.
And my wife and I knew one of the reasons we were in debt is we weren't enjoying Domino's Pizza anymore. So we wanted out, didn't know what we were going to do, but we thought, well, we know franchises. Let's get another franchise. And we went to a franchise expo. We looked at all the booths, didn't like anything. And 2 weeks after the expo, we get this letter in the mail with 2 tickets to an evening called the Millionaire Mind Evening with T. Harv Eker.
Yep.
Now, what's interesting is each ticket was worth $39. And thank goodness they were, because the only reason we showed up at the training was because they had a $39 value on them. And thank goodness my mind would not let me waste $39 tickets. And we showed up and we weren't feeling well. But by the end of the evening, we're both feeling amazing.
Yeah.
And when they talked about their 3-day weekend, we went running to the back. We laid down $600 that we didn't have, but we knew we had to be. And that was in March of 2001. And
Wow.
the training was 3 months later in June. And the only reason I showed up at that training was to get my money back. That's it. Because I was like, buyer's remorse. What are we doing? We can't afford this. We're deep in debt. And I was ready for that fight. I was ready to walk in and for them to tell me, you can't have your money back. And the girl doing registration, she was like a deer in the headlight look, like, ah! She didn't know what to do. And because she's a volunteer, she goes, 1 moment. She goes, Shelly, can you come over here? And the nicest woman in the world, by name is Shelly Weenus, she comes up and she's like, she knows what's going on. And instead of fighting, she goes, you know what? There's nothing I can do right now, but come in until lunch. By lunch, I'll have answers for you. Oh, okay. So I dragged my wife in because she was out in the vehicle. She didn't want to come in. Drag her in, and we're in there. And of course, by lunchtime, we're in the energy.
Yeah.
Oh. Shelly comes up. She finds it. She goes, oh, there you are. Let's talk about your refund. And we're like, we don't want a refund. Yes, we're having too much fun. Get away. By the end of that weekend, Calvin, we ended up buying the whole kit and caboodle. We ended up doing a $12,000 program. Again, I maxed every credit card. I had to do it because my wife and I just knew this was going to make a difference. We left that weekend with a different mindset, a different understanding around finances. Next thing you know, we end up going from being $150,000 in debt to actually being completely retired, financially free 9 months later. 9 months later, at the age of 32.
Wow, that's incredible.
And my mind went, this worked. And so I realized if this much information gave me that result, what would more do? And for the next 2.5 years, my wife and I dived in to learn from every master we could. And that's when I found my passion was to teach, because 2 things. A, I'm a big believer. Don't just learn one way from one person.
Yeah.
Learn from everybody. That way you have your different perspectives, different things that you'll pick up. But 2, I believe that if I could even help one person do what my wife and I had been able to do, go from that financial stress to financial success, it would make it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
And another problem we ran into, though, T. Harv Eker was saying, I'm looking for trainers. He was only in Canada at this point.
Right. Wow.
And he's like,
so
I'm
early days.
Early, yeah. He goes, I'm looking for trainers, but you have to have so much experience in front of so many people for so many years. And experience whatsoever. But coming back to my favorite word, passion.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to make a reality, and fast forward, I ended up becoming his very first protege, the very first person to ever train one of his trainings, which was in June of 2004. I did my very first Millionaire Mind intensive 3-day weekend, 1,200 students in Los Angeles, because we are now in the US. And when we broke the mold and showed someone else could teach his program other than him, all of a sudden we exploded across North America. I started training hundreds and hundreds of trainers, because I was doing our Train the Trainer program 6 times a year in North America alone, with 300 to 450 people per class. And then in 2007, we launched the international, where we went to Singapore, where we had 5,600 students for the very first weekend, did $6.5 million in sales that weekend. And, you know, the rest, as they say, is kind of a little bit of history, but learned a lot of lessons along the way with it. That's
absolutely remarkable. I could take this conversation in 7 or 8 different directions. I love it. Let me go back a couple of steps to the distinction there. I think my wife and I both work in our business, and I can, and it's rare to find a true partnership in that way. There's a lot of couples I meet that you should never work together. You barely can stay together when you're together, never by working together. But Ash and I hit it very lucky, and we love working together, and it's a very, very special bond. So what a remarkable partnership you had in the beginning to connect in with your wife and have the commitment to one another to pursue that vision together. I mean, I'd love just to talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's an element when you're young that you don't know what you don't know, right? So there is an element of let's why not do this? But that's probably, it's too easy to just write it off as naivety. What do you think was the key secret there in the selection of you and your wife being together that's allowed you to be in such a beautiful relationship for such a long time, but also have that commitment to going, yeah, we're going to go and take this crazy risk of becoming Domino's manager and assistant manager and then franchisees? That's not a path that most people sign up for when they get married to somebody, right? So how do you sell that piece?
Well, and it's interesting you ask it that way, because one of the things I tell people from the stage, and I have no problem telling them, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for my wife.
Agreed.
Because with my mindset, I was taught you don't think outside the box. You get that job, you find something that pays you the most possible and has the biggest security. Yeah. And because even if you hate it, you do it to take care of your family. Yeah. And my wife and I are both the youngest in our families. We knew each other since we were 13. We started dating when we were 16, and then that's when she tackled my ass to the ground in a game of football to get my attention because I hadn't noticed her. We started dating the next day, and at 19 we got married.
Wow.
So when I moved to Calgary, and I had 2 weeks to get packed up and move and start managing. And so I had an aunt and uncle that said, come stay with us. We're only a few blocks from the store, not a problem. And on the weekends, my wife, she would come up and we'd look for a place to rent so we could move. And then she'd come back and pack up the house, that we were living in, the basement suite. Wow. And so she was doing that. And she was up one weekend though, only like 3 weeks into me managing the store. And I'm a new manager. I know nothing. And my assistant manager, a 17-year-old kid, I was the old guy at 21, but the 17-year-old, he'd been working for the store for 3 years. And on my first day, he said, I'm going to let you know right up front. He says, in the 3 years I've been here, I've watched 42 managers and assistant managers come through this store. 40? You're not going to be here long. Yeah. He says, you're not going to be here long. So I'm not going to listen to you. And so here I am, I'm on a Friday supper rush. We're making 80 to 100 plus pizzas an hour from scratch. And because I didn't have much experience, you talk about not knowing what you don't know, I had messed up my food order. And so I'm running out of food in the middle of a Friday night supper rush. So I'm calling all the other stores in the city to see who has food. And my wife's up there helping wherever she can because she hasn't, no experience, but she's helping wherever she can. And I finally find food and I have to go and pick it up at the other stores. Well, I guess the moment I left the store, my assistant manager started bad-mouthing me. He doesn't even know how to order food. He's not going to be here long. And he just starts trying to sabotage the team. And so I'm not aware this is going on, but he's doing it. And my wife's sitting there listening to him. So I get back and we get the supper rush over. We need to talk. So we go to the back. She goes, here's what's happening. Here's what Mark's been doing behind your back. We've got a decision to make. And I'm terrified. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, if we keep him, we're not going to do well. You're going to not last. She goes, we need to do something. You got to let him go. And I'm like, out of joke, Calvin, I said, who's going to be my assistant manager? You? And she looked at me, she goes, if that's what needs to be done, that's what we'll do.
Wow.
And I went, yeah. Wow. So I said, okay. I said, Mark, come back to the office. I said, look, I'm giving you your 2 weeks notice, you're done. And he looked at me, he goes, you can't do that. I said, I just did. And he's like, and he storms out and instantly left. And I'll tell you, when you talk about you don't know what you don't know, in the beginning, we probably shouldn't have been able to even run the store, but we were just too tenacious. And our franchisee would come in and teach us a little bit here, a little bit there. And we knew we wanted to do this. We wanted to have fun. We wanted to be successful at it. So we did. We started working open to close 7 days a week. Yeah. And 9 years later, when all of a sudden we're deep in debt and we're at that training, every time a new program was offered, she's running to the back to sign up. And I'm like, we can't afford it. We can't. What are you doing? We can't afford it. And when it came to the final big package, she's like, we're doing it. And I'm like, no, we're not. She goes, but yes, we are. I said, and here was the thing. I was the one doing the finances. She knew we were in debt, but she didn't know how far in debt we were. And I'm stressed out every time she's wanting to spend more money. So finally, I got up the courage to say, we need to talk. I said, you know, we're in debt, but I got to tell you how bad it is. And so we're sitting down, we're talking, and I said, look, we're $150,000 in debt. We're going down very quickly. That's why we can't afford it. She took a deep breath, Kelvin. And the first thing she said, thank you for telling me. Second thing she said was, I already knew. Of course she did.
Yeah.
And then the third thing she said is, so do you want to do the courses? I thought she was off her rocker. I'm like, did you just hear me tell you we're $150,000 in debt? And she goes, what did he just say from the stage? He said, instead of saying I can't afford it, which is a negative mindset, ask yourself, how can we afford it? Yeah. And one of the things about our relationship is, if there's something my wife truly wants, I will move heaven and earth to make it a reality. So I walked out into the hallway. I had my 5 credit cards on speed dial because we were playing credit card roulette, each one paying the other one's minimums.
I've been
So
there.
I had to know, I had to know how much was left on each credit card. And so I called them all up. And I know this is a silly question, Calvin, because I know the answer already, but do you believe that everything happens for a reason?
Yeah, of course.
When I added up, if I maxed out all 5 credit cards, when I added up, we had just enough to buy this program because you couldn't even do payments. You had to do it in full. Yeah. And so I took a deep breath. I went back to my wife. I said, here's the reality. We can do it, but it means we're going to have to be back at the store 7 days a week. I'll have to do deliveries to afford to have gas money. We're going to have to eat a lot of pizza. Well, I had every restaurant in the area on trade. I could trade for whatever food I wanted. Yeah. I said, are we willing to do this? And I said, it's going to be like when we first bought the stores. We're going to be sleeping on the oven some nights. We won't even be going home. Are we willing to do this? We made a decision. We made a commitment. We said, yes, we're doing it. And I'll tell you, embarrassment, first of all, because now I'm walking up to the counter to finish our registration. I'm saying, put 1,500 on this one, no more. This one you can put 2,000. This, and piecing it together. And again, it's this amazing woman, Shelly. She looks at me, she goes, this is every day for us. Don't be embarrassed. But I'm embarrassed beyond belief that we're in such financial disarray. And so, 9 months later, when all of a sudden we retire, it's like, wow.
So told me that's an unbelievable story. And, you know, I've been in very similar situations with my wife as well. And, you know, how lucky we are to have strong women around us as well. And, you know, for me, I've often said as well that what has motivated me, because I've seen this before, and I'm interested to get your take on this, Robert, actually, is that I see a lot of successful people lose hunger because you know, you sit at the table of success for long enough, you become fat, right? And you have a beautiful life and you create abundance. And after you no longer need to eat because, you know, you're already eaten, then that drive disappears. But for me personally, and I imagine it's very similar for yourself, that what drives me now is obviously the mission and the impact that we have, but more than anything is to continue to show up for Ash and to continue to be there and to continue to create that next level of what the lifestyle looks for us as well. Because I truly believe that, you know, go as far as you can see when you get there, you'll be able to see further, and you don't know what your dreams will be when you're living the life of your dreams. So you stretch yourself, you see what now the future holds, and great, let's go to that next level as part of that. I'm deeply fascinated to understand what happened in that transformation over 9 months. You know, you go from 150 in debt, you're running 2 stores, you're going backwards. That's a horrifying place to be. You know, I remember being in Brisbane, Australia, running a training program, and I check in at the front desk of this apartment building where we had our team staying, and there's, you know, this older lady sitting at the front desk, and she saw the company name Wild Success. She says, "What is it that you do?" And I explained, we do trainings, blah 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 blah. And she says, "You know, me and my husband, we used to be into that sort of stuff, and we ended up selling our business, and we bought this apartment block where they had like the management license for it. And it was a great idea at the beginning. and then they just didn't manage it properly. And she says, we fell on some hard times, and now we're here and we can't afford to sell it, but we also can't really afford to keep running it. And so you're in a position where everything that you own is tied up in an asset that's not performing. In fact, it's now costing you money, but you can't afford to get rid of it because there's so much in that is, really, really challenging. And we're seeing that exist for so many people across America, Australia, Canada, etc., around the world with COVID. People that had a brick and mortar store, their whole lives were in that, now where it gets shut down, they can't trade. The whole world's changing for them. So, to say that you could go, hey, we have magic wand, 150 in debt to becoming financially free in 9 months, people go, yeah, okay, good luck, right? So talk to me about what that transformation was, both in terms of tactics, but also in terms of the mindset and who you had to become to make that shift.
And you said it so well, mindset and tactics. So one of the first things that we realized why we were in debt is because we didn't know how to manage our money. And we were thinking instant gratification. As Harv says, rich people think long term, poor people think short term. So here we are. Just before we went to the event, we'd actually sold one of our stores out of necessity.
Right.
And at the time, I thought we got taken advantage of. Now, with my understanding, I know we allowed it to happen. We taught the guy that it was okay to treat us that way, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And so,
great lesson.
It was critical. And when we walked in and we're doing the exercise, we realized one of the reasons we're so deep in debt is because we had all the toys. One of our stores was in a resort community. So of course we're living on the lake, you got to have a boat. Now the stupid thing, Calvin, is our boat sat in our driveway, never got used because our busy season was boating season. But we had the boat, look at us. We got the boat and all the expenses. We had 2 vehicles. We're working together 7 days a week. So we only use 1 vehicle at a time, but we had 2 vehicles, all the expenses. So our expenses were way up here. And we didn't know what passive income was. We had never heard of it. So that was non-existent. So of course we were never going to be financially free.
Yeah.
So the mindset was, first, we understood why. So second was, what are we going to do about it? And we knew we had to make some tough decisions. We knew that, look, what don't we need right now that if we were to get rid of it, we'd get rid of the expenses, which would allow us to not have to have as much passive income. And I go back to, and this is kind of, when I tell my story, a lot of people, they go, oh, $150,000 in debt to millionaire immediately in 9 months. No, I'm financially free. And if you look at the definition of financial freedom, it's when your passive income is greater than your expenses. So in the 9 months, we still had some debt, but now we had enough passive income. We actually found 2 that very quickly started creating some good results. And as we dramatically reduced our expenses, dramatically, you talk about making hard decisions. When we dramatically dropped them, it only took the 9 months for the 2 to surpass each other. So now we were technically financially free. And the cool thing though is you go back to the universal principle, what you focus on expands. Now we went from working 70, 80 or more hours a week in our Domino's Pizza, the one that we had left. We now had 70, 80 hours a week of free time. And so we took 10 of those hours to creating wealth. And all of a sudden you put it on 10 hours a week on creating wealth. How easy is it to create wealth? Very easy, because you're now focusing on it.
Yeah.
So the 9 months got us financially free, but barely, but it gave us the freedom to now focus on the wealth. And I'll tell you, the day we retired, which was April 1st, and I don't know if in Australia you guys have April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
But what an appropriate day.
Yeah.
April 1st, 2002 was the day we retired officially.
Right.
And we spent the next 2.5 years, we volunteered at every event that we could at our own expense, because I knew we wanted to keep learning. And so we actually were volunteering. Yeah. 38 events a year we were volunteering at in Canada alone at our own expense for 2.5 years, because A, it was our way of giving back. B, what a great way to learn. And C, is because of that, I got put on stage for the first time, because years later, Harv goes, you know why I put you on stage first time? I said, no idea. He goes, because I couldn't ignore you anymore. He said, you were always showing up and you were being of service. He said, and one day I knew I had to get you to help me out. And that's actually what started my whole journey of actually being the trainer, even though I had no experience.
Yeah, wow. Fantastic. That's unbelievable. Congratulations to you and your wife. I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate the downward momentum or downward pressure you have to put on expenses in order to get to that destination. There's a lot of talk in our culture around your financial freedom, financial independence, whatever level you want to attach to those different levels that you go through. And a lot of people don't check the finance in terms of how much they're spending. We have a program, it's like an introductory money course, a free program called 5 Days to Quit Cash. And we get people to look at their expenses over the last 90 days, and we get them to break them down into a couple of areas: necessities, which is food, shelter, clothing, electricity, etc. Quality of life things, so things that have a meaningful quality of life, splurge, wasted money, and then like debt repayments, right? Yep. What's fascinating to me, though, is the dollar per person in the household of necessities can vary dramatically, because people go, oh, I have to have a house. Yeah, you do have to have a house, but a house that is, say, $500 a week in rent is still the same as a house that's $200 a week in rent, but it still counts as a necessity, right? So people just become associated to a certain lifestyle and go, well, this is a necessity for me, which is beautiful from a standards perspective, but they forget not everyone lives like this. And I was speaking to somebody the other day who said that 6 out of the 7 billion people on the planet live on less than $32 a day. So if they can do that and be happy, then the reality is you can find a way to still find happiness and everything else. And if you sacrifice for that small period, and that gives you the breathing space for time, is very important. I saw in your bio, Robert, before we spoke about the 4 currencies, and I might be taking this from you, but I remember reading from Tim Ferriss about this. I'm not sure if this is a similar concept around time, money, passion, and location, and that was his variation of it, and realizing that there's some different nuances. Is that the same as what you refer to as the 4 currencies?
2 of the 4.
Okay.
So yeah, one is your money. Money is a currency. Too much money is called affluenza, and when you have too much money, you do crazy things with it. Like you look at the guy in UAE that bought A380, spent $1 billion on an airplane, 100 million on re-renovating it to be his party plane. Okay, that's affluence. That's too much money. Too little money is poverty. And so, when you're in poverty, you have the stress level. The second one, that's the same as time. And too much time, you're bored. Too little time, you're stressed out beyond belief.
Yep.
The third one that I talk about is fame. Everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame, and they don't realize the ups and downs of it. And I love the example of Jennifer Lopez, because, and again, you are one of the few people I can talk to that would really have an understanding of this. Because when you're a trainer and you're in front of everybody, they're like, oh my God, I love you. I want to do what you do. Well, if you want to do what I do, then you have to be willing to do what I do behind the scenes to be able to make this happen.
Yeah.
And so someone was interviewing Jennifer Lopez, and they said, how is it that you keep your fame and you have an amazing family life? How do you keep them separate? And she said, easy. She said, when I'm on camera, I'm in front of an audience or I'm singing, I'm J-Lo. But when I'm home, I'm Jennifer Lopez. So for me, when I'm on stage and I'm around the world, I'm Robert Raymond Riopel. But when I get home, I'm Rob. And my wife, like when I come home from 2 months, pre-COVID, I was traveling on average 200,000 miles a year around the world training, and still taking 6 months a year off. And when I get home, the running joke is, honey, you're home, take the trash out. There's no more staff here to assist on everything you have. And so it's very important to keep those 2 separate, right? So fame. Yeah. And then the fourth turn, experience. And this is the one that I'm really focused on right now, Calvin, is because it's all about experience. What are you going to do? But not just what are you going to do, what are you going to experience about it? So I'm now running, one of the adjustments I've made is, because I'm not traveling 200,000 miles to zero, my wife and I bought a beautiful acreage 3 years ago, and with the goal of one day building our own training center on it.
Beautiful.
So instead of me traveling, people travel to me. Well, COVID sped that up by a couple of years, and I'm looking out my dining room window here, and I've got my 1,500 or 150 square meter facility is about 2 weeks away from being completed, right outside my window, attached to my house. And so it's, when people come to work with me, it's not just going to be come here because I love training trainers. That's my passion. When I can take someone and I can make a small adjustment to enhance their authenticity and their presence on the stage, that's what just brings me so much joy. And it's not going to be just coming here for me to tear you down, build you back up, make you a greater trainer. It's going to be, what is the experience we're going to have while you're here? What are we going to do? Are we going to go canoeing? Are we going to sit and play horseshoes in my backyard around a fire pit while we roast marshmallows and stuff like that later in the night? What's the experience? Because that fourth currency of experience, too many people go through their life and all of a sudden they look back and they go, well, what did I do for the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Yeah.
I made money, but I don't remember what happened with, why did now I know why my family fell apart.
Yeah.
And now I know why my health went to shit.
Yeah.
You know? So it's about having that experience in your daily life and really taking the stress away by having that balance. And it's, you know, people think balance is this, and that's not my experience, because it's never going to be perfect. It's always, and for those listening, I'm moving my hands up and down, because balance is ever adjusting, making corrections to keep your life where you want. You know, my first 4.5 years training, I did over 200 events, multi-day events around North America, and then starting into Asia, I was home on average 2 days a month. I got burnt out. I decided to take a year off. That 1 year turned into 3.5 years. And when I realized I had to come out of retirement, not for money, but because it was my passion, and there's a whole kind of thing behind that. When I was asked to come out of retirement by Success Resources, who you know, they had just bought Harvest Company in North America. And they said, look, you know, will you come out of retirement? And I was ready. I'm like, yeah. But I said, but here's the thing. I noticed that overliving my passion was bad. I went through 2 back surgeries during my time off because I hadn't been taking care of my health. I was overliving my passion. I was burnt out. And when I went into, took the 1 year off, which turned into 3.5, I went from overliving it to not living it at all, just as bad.
Yeah.
And so I had to bring that balance. So when they asked me to come out of retirement, I said, here's the deal. I said, I'll do 20 trainings a year, maximum, wherever in the world you use me. So even with travel, I still take 6 months a year to be off. Because Calvin, I love my time off. I love my time off. And for the 8 years from retirement to COVID hitting, I was hitting 19, 20, maybe 21. I averaged 20 trainings a year around the world, because it's allowing me to live my passion, but it's also allowing me to have the life that I truly want to live at the same time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does so much. And I love those 4 elements. You know, someone that we share as a mutual friend in contact is Vishen from Mindvalley. And I've done a bit of stuff with them, and I saw that you were on their podcast as well. I listened to a bit of it just before our call today, just to get a bit of a flavor for that. And one of the things I remember learning from Vishen was the idea of, when you're thinking about the life that you want to live, thinking about how you want to grow, what experiences you want to have, and how you want to contribute. And I'm a big one for experiences. And I think when we're in this world, in the personal development seminar world, it's so much about experiential learning. It's so much about creating an experience, because you realize if I just talk at you, you're not going to remember anything. But if I can create an experience, whether that be as Harv would do with the arrow or the board break or Tony's firewalk or whatever it is, people remember that. They anchor to that. And that can be really transformational experiences. People remember that as well. So I think, you know, when you live that life, you're constantly looking for that high. I think that full experience of life outside of the seminar room, and that's very difficult to recreate. But I think there's obviously that experience, being able to create it for people and being able to live it, I think is a beautiful one. And I hadn't heard those 4 stacked like that. So I think that's excellent. I'm really interested to get a take from you. You know, there's a lot of clients that we coach. And we got about 200,000 clients now, 83 countries. A lot of them are looking to become coaches or consultants. And then eventually, after you've sort of whet your appetite with that, you go, I want a bit more than this. And then they look to become facilitators and trainers and speakers, right? And for me, my background before I worked with Chris Howard, obviously mutual friend as well, and we've shared some crazy synergies there, was I studied as an actor for 5 years. So before, when I was finishing my final years of high school, from 12 years old to 17, I studied to be a professional actor and performer. So when I got into the world of Chris Howard and personal development, I'd already had that experience before I became a speaker. So it was natural for me to do that. That wasn't hard. I just had to learn the business of speaking. I did that, and now we've got a great business. But most people, you know, we say to people, when people come to our events, they go, I want to do what you do, as you mentioned. I want to come work for you. I go, look, Calvin on stage and Calvin behind the scenes, I'm still equally passionate, but don't think it's the rah-rah song and dance that you get from us on stage. It's a different world. Like most of the actual running of a speaking business, of a coaching business, isn't glitzy and glamorous, and it's not all of that. It's a lot of hard work trying to overcome enormous obstacles to get people to believe in themselves enough to show up and have a great experience. And if people realized how hard that was, they would just fucking show up to seminars, right? They would just do it. So I'm really interested. I mean, you were mentioning that your wife was one of the key logistics managers for Harv in his heyday, and then actually ended up training Chris's team as well, and ended up working with Chris. So that's amazing. And there's other than Tony, you'd probably struggle to meet two gentlemen like Harv and Chris that have actually impacted more lives from stage. I mean, they're got to be two of the biggest seminar leaders. You got to see your inside the engine room, much like I did with Chris. Although I didn't get to see Chris in his heyday, I got to see it the post heyday. But I'm fascinated to get your take on what you felt was some of the key distinctions or learnings from your time being so close to Harv, and obviously then in your own right as being a seminar leader and a trainer now as well. What are some of those distinctions? You've got a book which is that was Success Left a Clue.
That's correct.
People should grab that book, and I think we've got a download gift for them to check that out as an ebook that they can have a look at that. But I'm interested to know, what are some of those clues that success left for you with regards to speaking, to training, to running a business in that world? Because it's not just the stage, right? There's also the running of the business to make that happen. It's the seminar sales that make the stage. You don't just get to speak. There's also a requirement that you fill rooms and that you can obviously deliver an experience.
Oh yeah, and especially in the beginning, if we did a weekend where we did less than $1 million in sales, that was considered a failure. It was, and so you talk about the pressure that's put on you to be able to do that. I just finished last week with a friend that a former student that now has his own training company. We just finished a 5-day challenge, and it was about teaching others some of the insides of being a speaker. And right off the top, what I told him, I said, if I do my job well, I'm going to convince you not to be a trainer. And I said, because you need to know look, my name, Robert Raymond Riopel, the 3 R's also stand for I keep it real. I'm not going to just give you the fluff. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm going to make sure it's relevant, and I'm going to make sure it's repeatable. But it's the real I focus on a lot, because, look, 2019, my first training of the year, I fly to Germany. I do a 3-day weekend. And then on the Tuesday, I fly to Sweden to start the next one on the next Friday. And because I went through 2 back surgeries, I'm very aware of my body and what's going on. And sometimes I get an episode and I land in Sweden. And one of the easiest ways to get my back to release if it starts to knot up is I walk, and I walk fast. But it's winter and it's icy. And all of a sudden my back starts locking up. And I actually had to make the decision, give myself permission for 2.5 days to lay in bed and do nothing. Because I knew if I didn't, because I was in such pain, I knew if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to do the 3 days on stage. Right. And so these are the things that people have to understand. But what's interesting, Calvin, is it's the same in any industry. If you want to be the top, you've got to be willing to put the work in. Yeah. So when I would develop trainers, and I've been blessed to train thousands and thousands of trainers, and all the ones that said, I want to be a trainer like you with you guys, I want to do what you're doing, then the first thing they had to do is they had to volunteer their ass off. Because as a trainer, you need to be aware of what's going on in that room. So I can stand on the stage and I know every part of logistics so intimately. I know if something's not quite right or not ready, or if an adjustment has to be made. But so many people come in, they go, no, I want to start at the top. Yeah. Bull, start at the bottom. I've shined shoes, I've pressed shirts, I've delivered food. I've done any and every job. I've scrubbed toilets, and I've done it with 100% happiness. Because this, to me, I talk about what's called the authority master key, and it's how to become vital. And I use the word vital as an acronym. And the V stands for you have to be a virtuoso. A virtuoso is someone who gets a specialty skill, and they just jump in, they start wherever they have to get that skill. And so in my book, as an example, the second step of success out of the 6 is find a mentor, someone to model from. Well, some of the greatest mentors are A, either not around anymore, or B, you can't get to them. So you have to get creative. This is why I love biographies, reading and watching, because I don't want to just see the success. I want to know what the journey was that they had to get through so that I can avoid the pitfalls And in the beginning, when I was volunteering, we're now getting to know Harv. My wife and I are traveling everywhere. We're actually giving him a ride from venue to venue. We get to actually sit down and have a drink with him after a preview or whatever. So we're getting to know him. And one day I got the courage. We're in Edmonton, Alberta. And the next day we're driving him to Red Deer and to do the next talk. And we're having a drink after the preview. And I said, Harv, I have a question I've been wanting to ask you for a while. He goes, what is it? I took a deep breath and I said, would you mentor me? He looked at me and he said, no. He says, one, I don't have time to do one-on-one mentoring. And two, it would cost you about $1 million. Now, I'll be honest, Calvin, I took it hard. I'm smiling. Okay, well, appreciate it. Thank you. But the moment my wife and I were alone, I exploded. Who does he think he is? We volunteer so much. That's it. We're not volunteering anymore. And I just went off the deep end. And my wife sat there and listened and listened and listened. Let me vent. And when I'm done, she goes, are you done? I'm like, what do you mean, am I done? She goes, are you done? Well, how dare you? She goes, obviously you're not done. Get it out. I vent even more. I finish and she goes, are you done? I'm like, I'm done. And we're done. We're not volunteering. She goes, first of all, you're telling me you're upset that Harv spoke his truth and you can't handle it. Look how busy he is. Do we have $1 million? Well, no, we don't have $1 million. She goes, so you're upset that he spoke his truth. Get over it. Two, and Calvin, I don't know how long you've been married, but I've learned in 32 years of marriage, two most important words in a marriage, yes, dear. And then second thing she says, then she goes, and the second thing is, you're wrong. Not only are we not going to stop volunteering, we're going to volunteer more. I looked at her like, pardon me, what are you talking about? She goes, how have you been learning from him? Have you not been learning every time we volunteer? Well, yeah. She goes, let's volunteer more then. He's going to mentor you whether he wants to or not.
Yeah.
And it was like 2 weekends later, I became his personal assistant, his stage manager. And we ended up doing a 5-weekend run of 5 weekend events in a row throughout North America, Canada and into Seattle. Yeah. And so I'm his personal assistant. And all of a sudden, that same woman, Shelly, she comes up to me and she goes, do you realize in the last 5 weeks, you've spent more one-on-one time with Harv than any staff member has in the office in over a year? And I created the reality that he mentored me and it didn't cost me $1 million. What did it cost me? A couple of years of my time and an investment on traveling around on my expenses. And it was years later, I'm at an event and just before I really started training, and another volunteer, we were having a good conversation and he goes, you know, for all that you and Roxanne do, I hope you get paid a lot. And I looked at him and said, we actually don't get paid anything. What do you mean you don't get paid anything? I said, we pay our own expenses to be here. And this guy went off the deep end because how dare he be so cheap? Blah, 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 blah. And on your podcast, I've been listening to talking about mentorship and apprenticeships, yes, which is so key, right? And I when he finished, I said, let me ask you a simple question. I said, did you go to university? Well, of course I went to university. I said, how many years? Well, it took me 4 years. I said, what did it cost you? And he gave me $1. I said, oh, I get it now. I know why you're upset, because you spent this much money and went to university for 4 years to do what you're doing now. And you're upset that I took 2.5 years and saved myself $1 million to do what I'm about to do. I get why you're upset.
Yeah.
He hadn't put the two together, that it was the same thing. I was investing in my future. And because of it, I now have the life that I love and very few people have the opportunity to have. But they look at it, but Robert, university's okay to pay for and put time into, but someone not paying you, it's an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And I wish the world would go back to more of an apprenticeship. If people
couldn't agree more.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is where you want the conversation to go, Calvin.
No, perfect. This is something that's so close for me because, you know, my story is, as you know, you've seen on the podcast, is that obviously I ended up booking in randomly to speak to Chris's team about a trainer's training and becoming a life coach and a business owner. Tried to sell me a $9,000 training program at the time, and I was running a nonprofit organization. I'm a uni student. I have no money, but I have skills. And you talk about, the experience and the time. I had the time because I wasn't doing anything else, and I had the experience that I could provide to Chris, because Chris, obviously being Chris, had obviously a vision, but he had no technical ability to run or manage a team because he hadn't done that. When you have 100 staff, you don't do any of that, right? So I was like, look, I can help you do that. I've got 120 volunteer staff now. I built this company. Let me come and help you. And I said, look, I'll fly at my own expense. I'll live and work with you for free for a month to do this. And he said, look, if you're going to come for a month, you've got to come for 3 months. 3 months became 6 months. 6 months became 12 months. I worked for free. But I lived and worked with him for 7 days a week, nonstop, 6 months. And it was like just a vacuum. But I came out of that with just a robust knowledge of this industry. Obviously, all of my NLP and coaching skills. I was already training for Chris at the time as well. But you talked about this, and I'm not sure if you mentioned this on the podcast now, or if you mentioned it before on the podcast. But you're talking about why Harv got you to be his first trainer. It's like, well, you're showing up. I can't ignore you. For me, first opportunity to speak to Chris was 2.5 weeks after I started working and volunteering with him, because there's no one else there. No one's going to do your introduction. If it's not going to be me, we're going to have to play a video of Johnny Cassie's old trainer. I'm here. Let me do it. And, sometimes you get lucky and you get a shot, and I smashed it out of the park, and, now I'm doing this. But, the reality is anyone could have had that chance to have that moment, but no one else was there. So there's a lot to be said for apprenticeships. And I say that to people now, it's so ingrained for me. And there's a statistic in Australia, I imagine it's much repeated in Canada, which is that about 63 to 65% of undergraduates at university study a degree that they never end up doing. And for me, the reason why is because I remember when I went to uni, I originally started doing a double degree in law and business. And I wasn't sure, my mindset of being a lawyer was very different to the practicality. And I realized after a week of studying law that this is in no way what I envisioned it was going to be. So I don't want to be a lawyer unless I really enjoy that work. And, I often say to young people, look, forget about doing uni. Just go and volunteer for a week in any of the businesses that you want to be involved in, because you'll actually get a taste for what it's like. If you don't like the work, you're not going to like what you think it's meant to be like. For me, people don't get this. And I think you'll appreciate this more than most, Robert, is because I had to do everything in our business in the beginning to get to the point to be on stage. For me, there was never a disconnect between going, I love being on stage and I hate this work. No. I love all of this because every little bit of this goes to creating a great online or a live event experience. So for me, I love doing every part of it. And so when I speak to coaches or consultants or trainers or whoever it might be, and they go, I don't want to do this bit of the business, I go, you don't fully get this picture yet. Because if you can even delineate in this, if there's a bit that you don't like, then you're missing the bigger picture of that it's all this. Everyone wants to stand on stage and perform to 100,000, 10,000 people. That don't happen unless you do all the other stuff. And so if you can't fall in love with the process, you don't deserve the reward at the end of the step as well. I think there's so 100%. Much wisdom in that, and I think there's an importance of mentorship. Fastest way to go from A to B is to find someone that's already done it before. Outside of just learning and cutting your teeth and volunteering as well, as a speaker, as a trainer, where do you see the breakdown happen for a lot of people in terms of them growing a business in that world? And then also, in addition to that, what do you see as being some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that people make in your experience, just from a facilitation standpoint, right? Like the actual craft of that.
Oh, well, practice. I'm just going to sum it up like that. The number one thing that most people, they say they want to do something, is that now practice. Well, I don't really have an audience yet. Practice, and as an example, look, COVID, I'm not traveling around the world, but I am on average, 5 to 10 trainings, interviews, or something a week. So I'm still honing my skill because I'll never quit being a student. The moment I quit being the student, I'm done. And so I'm finding ways to. So practice is number one. 2 is understand your strengths and where you're not strong, and then find people. I've been a one-person business for 18 plus years because I've been blessed to say, they come to me and say, well, we've got these events. Which ones do you want? Oh, I'll take that one, that one. Do you want to do this one? Nope, that's an important time for me to be at home, right? So I haven't had to worry about that. So now I just brought on my first 2 virtual assistants. And I'm starting to understand the importance of rebuilding a team. I had teams in Domino's Pizzas that without them, we couldn't have done, my wife and I couldn't run a store on our own. And so it's understanding that you are good at one thing. Don't try to be good at everything. Now, do I understand, like what you were just saying? Do I understand all aspects? Yes. Could I do them if need be? Yes. But then there's a point of, when do you say, well, this is not, it's not that it's not worth my time, but if I'm doing this part of it, then the part that's making the biggest impact isn't being done, which means our whole team will pay the price.
Yes.
So, and it's just having the self-awareness and surround yourself with amazing people that, like, when I keep referring to my wife, she holds me to a higher standard. That's a gift she gives me. If I'm playing small, she kicks my ass and says, step up. And I give her that same gift back.
Yeah.
And so it's surrounding yourself with people that, I have a not an accountability friend. He's a friend that if I need to just vent, and we do this for each other, I can just reach out and say, Aaron, I just need to talk. Yep. He'll get on the other line. I can vent. He doesn't take it personally. He just allows me to get it out. And then when I'm done, he's like, so you done? And I'm like, yeah, I'm done. Thank you very much. And that's it. We don't have to sit there and say, oh, woe is me. It's just, if I'm pissed off about something, I get it out. I let the energy go, because if I hold it in, it's not doing any good. So you've got to surround yourself with people that are the ones that are willing to tell you their truth with compassion if you're being an asshole, and to be the same ones to pick you up if you're beating yourself up so bad that I failed, I didn't do this didn't work. Great, okay, get over it. What did we learn? Let's move on.
Yeah.
So having those kind of key people around you is absolutely critical as well.
Absolutely. To that extent, when you think back to those early days with Peak Potentials and then obviously what then became Success Resources, there's a lot of speakers that start in this game, and there's very few of them that would reach the heights that Harv did, obviously in his time at the top. What do you think was the secret sauce for him that allowed him to really penetrate a marketplace and just create a following that has really only been replicated a couple of times in its volume?
Well, Harv just says from the stage, he wanted to be a millionaire. And so he had that drive, and he found that speaking was probably the greatest way to do it. And one of his many brilliances is he can take concept that people have been teaching for years, and he puts it in a way that an everyday person gets it.
Yeah.
And so mix that with the accelerated learning, and all of a sudden now people don't just get it, they ingrain it. They make that cellular change. And being the savvy businessman, he knows that it's give them what they want first. And while you give them what they want, give them what they need, because people won't pay for what they need, even if they need it, until they want it. And so he's a very savvy businessman that way, knows when to get into something and knows when to exit as well. You think about it, he probably sold his company right at the pinnacle of time when it was the perfect time to do it. And it was just before, another kind of economic crash. And so he rode the wave and around the world, it's still licensed to him. So he's still making that ongoing passive income month after month after month with his material being trained all over the world.
Yeah.
And for your new coaches, here's what I want them to understand. He didn't start around the world. When I became a student, he was in 2 provinces, Alberta and British Columbia. He was a huge room for him at the time when I was a student was 700, and it had taken him years to get to that. His very first training was 8 people in his basement, and he had actually promised to make him lunch and paid him money to come and be there just so he could get the first one done. And that's the key. You've got to get one done and then do it. So whenever I train trainers now, I'm like, let's design a way that the moment we're done in the next 2 weeks, I want to see your first training done. First training done and a video sent to me so I can coach that video of how you did. Because if you don't do it in the first couple of weeks, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
You're just not, we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
So practice is so critical.
From your perspective as well, just drilling down on a point I think is so critical. You mentioned, in the early days, if you did less than $1 million in a weekend, it was a failure. That's an enormous task. I remember having similar conversations with Chris as well. I remember Chris saying to me once when we walked into Singapore that in the early days of their breakthrough to success, some equivalent of the Millionaire Mindset Intensive, that by the time they opened the doors on Friday night, they were already $300,000 down just by opening the doors. That was the entry cost of running the event. And so obviously the pressure for them was to make that money, but obviously they used to do $1 million weekends all the time. And that, unbelievable numbers. I mean, it's remarkable to get that sort of conversion rate. At scale, selling to a small room, 10, 30, 50, even probably up to 100 people, very intimate. You get a great connection to people. It's not difficult to make those sales because you can almost see and feel and touch everybody. You get over 100, 500,000 people in a room, then it becomes a lot of heads. And you've got to really be able to connect to a broad group of people with a key message to be able to get them to be motivated enough to do what you and your wife did. Particularly if you've got money, it's not a difficult decision. But if you're in a bit of financial difficulty and you're going, do I eat or do I pay for this program? There's a compulsion act that is refined, is so delicate. So I'm interested to know what your experience is with the Sage sales and what you think are some of the absolute sort of laws, if you will, if you were to write a Bible that of working with a big group and making sales as a trainer. What are the sort of 2 or 3 things you think, okay, cool, if I'm going to tell a new trainer, do this when you're presenting a sale or when you're trying to influence an audience to take action, what would those be?
Well, one is authenticity right off the top. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be you. One of my pet peeves, and when I teach trainers, I tell them it's my number one pet peeve, is someone who's one way on the stage and they're a totally different way off the stage. You've got to be you. And one of my mentors taught me early in my career, he said, Robert, you can't be afraid to meet a student somewhere in the world and have to figure out who to be. Because all of a sudden it's like, I got to be trainer Rob. No, you've got to be authentic, be you. Which means if you're a jerk, be a jerk. Because at least the people who respect you for being a jerk, they're not surprised when all of a sudden they meet you and you're going, ooh, who's this guy, right? So authenticity is number one. Yep. Number 2 is you never, ever, ever sell something you don't believe in 100%.
Yeah.
Because if you try to, your audience is going to smell it. They're going to smell right through it. They're going to tell that you're just trying to push some bullshit. They can see that you don't believe it in yourself. And then if I was to say a third thing, because I would talk to a lot of students afterwards, be willing to tell someone not to buy. Because some people get so passionate, Kelvin, they're like, this is what I need, but they can't afford to feed their family in that moment. And look, did I do some drastic stuff, my wife and I? Yeah, but it was the 2 of us and our 3 dogs. So, we didn't have children's mouths to feed us and all that. So I don't know your situation, but when I'm talking to someone, if I get the sense that doing this is going to detrimentally affect their life, I'll tell them, don't do it. Take what you've learned this weekend, start putting into practice, come back. Now, on the same side, I've been at an event where a person's like, oh my God, this is the 7th time I've done this program. It's amazing. I'm like, and what have you done? What other courses? Well, I haven't done any yet. Why? Well, next time. Bullshit. That's just a story you're telling yourself. If you've been here 7 times, you know what to do to change your life. Now I'm going to need to kick you in the butt to take the next step. And for that one, it's go to warrior, right? So, so you've got to be present as a trainer to actually truly be interested in where your student's at. If you're thinking about the sales, you're going to sabotage. Because it's only, and it was another rule because everybody wanted to be a trainer with us. And so I would also say, here's my rule. The moment I sense that you're just doing this for the money, I will not train you anymore because you're doing it for the wrong reason. See, you do it because you truly want to impact lives. Money will come as a beautiful side effect.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it because you're going, oh, look at all the money you guys make, then I'm not training you because now you're just doing it for the wrong reason. And you talk about similarities. I was listening to the one podcast and you're talking about your journey with Isagenix, I believe it was. And so I know the very first trainer I ever trained to teach our Harvest material after me, because he went to Isagenix and became the person that trained all the trainings there and bought an island with it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We have a lot of you mentioned vision, because this goes to your coaches as well. You don't know whose lives you're impacting. One of the greatest reasons to be a coach, one of the greatest reasons to be a trainer, is because you don't have to know. Let's be clear on that. I didn't know that in 2008, Vision Lakiani was sitting in my audience in Kuala Lumpur, losing $15,000 US a month in Mind Valley, 9 staff there. He was going to walk out day 1 because he thought we were just trying to sell him something. On the 3rd day, and I find this out a year later, he actually bought Quantum Leap. Why? He said because it was me that convinced him to do it. He saw just the authenticity, the heartfelt.
Wow.
He didn't have a connection with Harv, but he loved the connection with me. And I had no idea. I had 4,800 students in the audience. No idea who this guy is. It's a year and a half later. I'm on my hiatus. It's in 2009. I'm hosting an event where we have the Dalai Lama, we have Sir Richard Branson, we have F.W. de Klerk, we have Stephen Covey Sr., we have Vishen Lakhiani, we have Les Brown, we have 18 of the most amazing thought leaders in the world, and I'm getting to host. So I'm getting to spend time in the green room with them, and I'm sitting there, and Vishen had just been on the stage and blew everybody away, and we're in the green room, and I'm like, dude, that was amazing, because he did the Bohemian Rhapsody, having the audience stand up to different parts of singing, and it just electrified the room. And he's sitting there and he's nodding his head, and eventually he says, you don't know who I am, do you? I'm like, sure I do. Your Vision, yeah, you got Michael. He goes, stop. He says, you don't know who I am and that I'm here because of you, do you? And I'm like, okay. And he told me the story about being in the audience and how in May of 2008, that moment from May 2008, they went from losing $15,000 a month to December of that same year. So June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 8 months later, they had their first $1 million month, and it made enough money to pay off all their debt, his school debt, buy their space in Kuala Lumpur for their head office. He said, and you don't realize you're the one that allowed me to do that because of your change in my life. And I had no idea.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Amazing.
That's probably one of the greatest reasons to become a coach and a trainer is because you think you may know how you can impact life, but you have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And David Wood, obviously, who you trained back in the ISA days, I met him early on, and it was fantastic to see some of his stuff in the early days as well. And I actually took a lot of good stuff from him when I was watching him through some of the Isogenics training, because we had so many clients that were in that space as well, and met Vishen a couple of times. So it's such a small world where you don't realize the impact that you have, and then you magnify that impact. I mean, Vishen's an incredible story and obviously a very quick turnaround, but as well, I imagine there's people that you've trained a decade ago that now have gone on to do incredible things, but you don't ever had the opportunity to sort of tie that loop. And that's a beautiful thing, not to never really know the legacy and how far that extends out. I think that's remarkable.
Exactly.
Magic.
And
absolutely incredible.
And I love actually even hearing the stories about the students that crashed afterwards. Because look, people have to understand it's not always, I took a course and everything's going to go great. You're on a journey in your life, and it's learning the ups and the downs.
Yes.
But if as a coach or a trainer, you can better equip someone to handle or go through it down, and get through it, that's just as powerful. Because you've certainly had it. I've certainly had it. Where even in the lifestyle we're in now, we have downs, and the question is, how do you handle it? Do you play the victim, or do you use those two powerful words? What's next? And make an adjustment. I've had to reinvent in the last year and a bit since COVID, and I played the victim for a couple weeks, and then it was like, okay, enough's enough. What's next? We don't know how long it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get virtual, so time to start learning virtual.
Yeah.
I've got no live events to go. I'm at home. I got time. Let's figure this out.
Yep.
All those things you said you didn't have time before, sure, you now have time for.
Yeah.
So
no excuses. Now fill your boots. Yeah. It's good. It's excellent.
Exactly.
Look, I could absolutely talk to you all day, and I believe we'll probably connect in and again in some capacity. But I'm fascinated for people that are out there at home that have loved this conversation. Robert, where do we find out more about you? How do we connect in a little bit more as well? Obviously, your first book, I want to get a copy of that. I want to read that myself, but also the second book you've got coming out as well is around building authority, and I'm interested to know a bit about that as well. So where do we go from here if we want to know more about you and connect in?
Well, easiest way, successleftaClue.com.
Right.
Site. You can follow me on Facebook, just Facebook.com/the Robert Riopel, and follow me as I do my journeys because I'm crazy and have fun. And then as a gift, I posted the link in our chat, and I know you're going to put it on your show notes. But if I would love for your audience to be able to get the ebook, the whole ebook of Success Left a Clue, as my gift to them.
Wow.
But I will tell them it's not a book to read. It's actually a workbook, because every chapter, each one of the 6 steps, there's action steps they have to take.
Right.
And they'll start reading the next chapter, and I'll say, right in it, I say, did you do the last action step? If not, stop reading now, go back and do that action step. Because the 3rd step in the book is take action. That's the biggest thing most people miss taking. And so I'd love for them to read that book, do the homework. It'll change their life. And then stay tuned, because the authority key, how to unlock and open the doors to your success, that will be coming out hopefully by the end of this year is what we're kind of targeting. Right. And it answers the question of why is it that people can have less experience than you or less knowledge, but they seem to make more money? Well, simple. They're seen as the authority. You're not. You're chasing customers. They're attracting customers. And so the authority key, and it's not just a practical skill. And I love acronyms. So Calvin, I use acronyms now for everything. And so unlock is the practical skills of being seen as an authority. Right. The open is the inner game, the 4 phases people go through of life. And that's what they need to work with on the inside to not only get success, as you're very aware, making money is one thing. Keeping it, totally different.
Totally different.
So why do people sabotage themselves? So the book covers both sides of that on really how to take control. So
right. Looking forward to it. I can't wait to read the first one and then read the second when it comes out, and every success for that. And I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I know it's now just gone 3:15 a.m. for you, which is remarkable. So I appreciate that deeply, and thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I wish you every success in the future. And I can't wait to have you on the show in the future again.
Oh, my pleasure. I appreciate you taking your time to reach out. And when I said, hey, I'd love to be on your show, and you made it happen quickly. So I'm happy to be here.
Beautiful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, a comment, a review, I don't know, something, wherever you watch it around the world. And until we see you live or online, on behalf of myself and Robin, be bold, have fun, make an impact in the world, and we'll see you on the wild side. Good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Catch you later.